in a quiet village nestled between emerald hills, lived a woman named Sita, whose words were as restless as the wind. Her days were spent weaving stories about neighbors and family alike, spinning harmless details into dramatic narratives. While she was always welcome at gatherings, her presence brought a quiet unease like a shadow lingering at the edge of light. One evening, during a family celebration, Sita leaned over to her niece, Maya, and whispered, "Did you notice how your cousin wore the same dress as last year? Times must be tough for them." Maya laughed nervously, not realizing how deeply this comment would cut when it was passed along and distorted. The Buddha once said, "The tongue is like a sharp knife. It kills without drawing blood." Sita's words, seemingly trivial, began to ripple outward, fracturing the bonds within her family. Her cousin, hurt by the gossip, stopped attending gatherings. Her brother, feeling exposed, became distant and guarded. The family, once close-knit, began to fragment, each member retreating into their own corner. Buddhist philosophy reminds us that words carry energy, shaping the emotions and perceptions of those around us. Gossip, though often cloaked in humor or concern, is a form of verbal karma that creates pain and distrust. The Buddha taught, what you think, you become; what you feel, you attract; what you imagine, you create. By speaking ill of others, we not only harm them, but also pollute our own minds with negativity. Sita, though unaware, was creating suffering for herself. As the years passed, her once large circle of friends grew smaller. Her relatives, wary of her sharp tongue, distanced themselves. Sita found herself increasingly isolated, her words coming back to her like echoes in an empty room. One day, Sita overheard a conversation at the temple about the concept of samaveka right speech. The monk explained that mindful speech involves refraining from falsehoods, harsh words, and idle chatter. Intrigued and humbled, Sita began to reflect on the damage her words had caused. She approached Maya, her niece, and said, "I've wronged you and others with my thoughtless words. I want to change." It was not easy to rebuild trust, but Sita's genuine effort to speak with kindness and truth began to mend broken relationships. The story of Sita teaches us the profound impact of speech. Relationships, even those tied by blood, are fragile threads that must be handled with care. Aligning with the Buddhist principle of right speech, we should seek to communicate with compassion, ensuring our words heal rather than harm. For in the end, the bonds we preserve with kindness are the ones that sustain us through life's impermanence. Far away in a bustling city, a young man named Arun lived with his elder brother, Dev. Dev had raised Arun after their parents passed away, and Arun loved and respected him deeply. Yet, their relationship was fraught with unspoken tension. Dev, though well-meaning, was a man of rigid expectations, often imposing his vision of life onto Arun. "You should take the accounting job," Dev insisted one evening as Arun hesitated over a job offer. "It's stable. You don't need to waste your time chasing dreams." Arun felt the weight of his brother's words. While he appreciated Dev's concern, he longed to pursue his passion for art. But each time he voiced his desires, Dev dismissed them, saying, "You owe it to the family to be practical." The Buddha taught, attachment leads to suffering. Dev's need to control Arun's choices stemmed from his attachment to an idea of security and success. He failed to see that his brother's path was his own to walk. Control, even when disguised as love, stifles growth and breeds resentment. Arun began to feel trapped, like a bird in a gilded cage. The love he had for his brother turned into silent frustration. His dreams felt like forbidden fruits, just out of reach. One day, he confided in a friend who shared a teaching from the Dhammapada. "You cannot travel the path until you have become the path itself." Inspired, Arun decided to speak his truth. "Dev," he said one evening, "I love you for all you've done for me, but I need to live my life on my terms. I want to pursue art, even if it means taking risks." Dev was taken aback. At first, he resisted, but Arun's calm determination softened his stance. Dev realized that his attempts to control Arun were rooted in his own fears. Slowly, he began to let go, trusting Arun to find his own way. Boundaries are acts of compassion not only for ourselves but also for others. They allow relationships to thrive without the burden of undue expectations. The Buddha's teachings remind us that true love liberates rather than confines. By stepping back, we allow others the freedom to grow, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the illusion of control. The story of Arun and Deb highlights the importance of respecting individuality, even within family bonds. Love should be a source of strength, not a chain that binds. Through mindful detachment and clear boundaries, we honor both our own journey and that of others. In this way, we cultivate relationships that are rooted in mutual respect and freedom, aligning with the natural flow of life's impermanence. In a small coastal town, there lived a woman named Priya and her elder brother, Shyam. Shyam often reminded Priya of the sacrifices he had made for her during their childhood. He would say, "I worked tirelessly to put food on the table and pay for your education. You owe me." Priya, deeply grateful, did her best to support him. She lent him money, helped with his business ventures, and even took care of his children when his wife fell ill. Yet Shyam's demands never ceased. When Priya hesitated to fulfill one of his requests, he accused her of ingratitude, saying, "How can you forget all I've done for you?" Buddhism teaches the importance of gratitude, but it also warns against the dangers of clinging. The Buddha said, "Attachment brings suffering. Liberation brings peace." Shyam's sense of entitlement arose from his inability to let go of past sacrifices, binding both him and Priya in a cycle of guilt and obligation. Priya began to feel suffocated, her own needs and dreams overshadowed by her brother's relentless demands. Despite her best efforts, nothing seemed to satisfy him. It was as if the gratitude she offered was never enough to fill the void in his heart. One evening, Priya attended a meditation session at a nearby monastery. The monk spoke about the concept of dana, giving without attachment. He explained, true generosity expects nothing in return. When we cling to our giving, we poison it with ego and turn it into a transaction. Priya realized that while she had been generous, she had also allowed Shyam's entitlement to take root by not setting boundaries. She decided to have an honest conversation with her brother. "Shyam," she said gently, "I am grateful for everything you've done for me, but gratitude doesn't mean I must sacrifice myself endlessly. Your past sacrifices were noble, but we must live in the present, not the past." Shyam was defensive at first, but over time he began to reflect on her words. He recognized how his own clinging to the past had clouded his judgment and strained their bond. The story of Priya and Shyam teaches us the importance of balancing gratitude with self-respect. True giving, as the Buddha emphasized, is free from expectation. When we encounter entitled individuals, even within our families, it is an act of compassion to set boundaries. By doing so, we protect both our well-being and the integrity of the relationship. In the bustling city of Mumbai, Ravi, a young entrepreneur, found success early in life. He often shared his milestones with his extended family, believing that his happiness would bring them joy. Among them was his cousin, Kiran, who always appeared supportive but carried a silent bitterness. Kiran's resentment grew as Ravi's achievements piled up. During family gatherings, Kiran would make subtle jabs. "It must be nice to have all the luck in the world," or "some people just have it easy." Ravi, though initially dismissive, began to notice how Kiran's words were laced with envy. Buddhist philosophy describes jealousy as a form of suffering rooted in ignorance. The Buddha said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." Jealousy blinds us to our own blessings and disconnects us from the interdependence of all beings. Kiran's envy not only poisoned his view of Ravi, but also deepened his own unhappiness. Ravi, confused and hurt, sought counsel from a wise teacher in his neighborhood. The teacher shared a teaching on mudita sympathetic joy. "Celebrate the success of others," the teacher said, "for their joy adds to the collective well-being of all." Inspired by this wisdom, Ravi approached Kiran not with anger, but with understanding. "Kiran," he said during a quiet moment, "I've noticed that my success seems to bother you. I value our bond and don't want jealousy to come between us." Kiran was startled by Ravi's directness, but also moved by his kindness. After a long silence, Kiran confessed, "It's hard to see you achieve so much while I feel stuck. It's not about you, it's about my own frustrations. Ravi offered words of encouragement, saying, your journey is your own, and it's just as valuable as mine. Let's support each other instead of competing. Slowly, their relationship began to heal, grounded in honesty and mutual respect. The tale of Ravi and Kiran highlights the transformative power of compassion and overcoming jealousy. The Buddha taught that when we rejoice in the success of others, we free ourselves from the shackles of comparison. While jealousy can harm relationships, it also provides an opportunity to practice mudita and deepen our connection with others. By addressing jealousy with kindness, we not only preserve relationships but also foster a sense of shared humanity. In a modest countryside home, Tara lived with her in-laws after marrying her husband, Raj. Raj's mother, Meera, was a pillar of the family, known for her warm hospitality and sharp wit. Yet, beneath her outward charm lay a talent for manipulation. Meera had a way of cloaking her demands in affection. Tara, you know I only want the best for you, she would say, her voice laced with concern. That's why I think you shouldn't take on that new project. Focus on the family instead, it's what truly matters. Tara often felt torn. She loved Meera and wanted to honor her as a dutiful daughter-in-law. Yet she couldn't ignore the sinking feeling of her independence slipping away, one decision at a time. Manipulators thrive on guilt, using it as a subtle tool to control others. Buddhism warns against such dynamics as they rob individuals of their autonomy and peace. The Buddha said, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. Meera's manipulation anchored Tara in a cycle of doubt and guilt, preventing her from fully embracing her own path. One day, Tara confided in her friend Priya, a woman with a deep understanding of Buddhist teachings. Priya shared the concept of upaya, or skillful means. It's possible to honor your family without losing yourself, she explained. Compassion for others must include compassion for yourself. Encouraged, Tara decided to approach Meera with honesty and calmness. Ma, she began, I deeply respect you and everything you've done for this family, but I also need to honor my own responsibilities to myself. I hope you'll support me in finding balance. Meera was initially defensive, but Tara's sincerity softened her. Over time, she began to understand that Tara's boundaries were not a rejection of the family, but a way to nurture her own well-being. The story of Tara and Meera reminds us of the importance of self-awareness in navigating manipulative relationships. The Buddha taught that wisdom and compassion must go hand in hand. By setting healthy boundaries, we protect our inner peace and cultivate relationships rooted in mutual respect. Manipulators often act out of fear or insecurity. Responding with empathy rather than hostility allows both sides to grow. In the bustling streets of Delhi, Rohit was known as the life of every party. Charismatic and daring, he lived without fear of consequences. His younger sister, Anika, had always admired his boldness. But over time, admiration turned to concern as Rohit's reckless behavior spiraled out of control. From gambling debts to impulsive investments, Rohit's choices began to take a toll, not only on his life but also on those around him. Anika often found herself bailing him out, using her savings to cover his mistakes. Each time, Rohit promised to change, but the pattern repeated. The Buddha taught, what you sow, so shall you reap. Recklessness stems from ignorance and inability to see the interconnectedness of actions and their consequences. Rohit's disregard for the impact of his choices created suffering not just for himself but for his entire family. One evening, Anika sought advice from a Buddhist teacher. The teacher explained the principle of karuna, or compassion, and its counterpart, prajna, or wisdom. Compassion is not about enabling, he said. True compassion allows others to face their karma and learn from it. Determined to help her brother in a meaningful way, Anika sat down with Rohit. Bahai, she said, I love you, but I can no longer fix your mistakes. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Rohit was taken aback, anger flashing across his face. But as days turned into weeks, he began to realize the depth of Anika's love. Her refusal to enable him was not a rejection but a call to accountability. Slowly, he started making changes, though the journey was far from easy. The story of Rohit and Anika teaches us that compassion must be paired with wisdom. Reckless individuals often drag others into their chaos, but enabling them only delays their growth. The Buddhist teachings remind us to act with clarity and kindness, allowing others to learn from their mistakes while protecting our own well-being. Through these 6 stories, we see the profound wisdom of Buddhist philosophy in navigating complex relationships. Gossip mongers, controllers, entitled individuals, the jealous, manipulators, and the reckless all bring challenges that test our patience, compassion, and boundaries. Yet each challenge is an opportunity for growth both for ourselves and for those we love. The Buddhist teachings of impermanence, karma, and compassion remind us that relationships are fluid, not fixed. By practicing mindfulness, setting boundaries, and approaching every interaction with empathy, we can preserve our inner peace while fostering deeper connections. Life, like a river, flows in one direction. Choose your companions wisely, for they shape the waters you navigate. And remember, as the Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. At the end of life, what truly belongs to us? This question is as ancient as human existence itself. From the palaces of kings to the humble homes of villagers, people have pondered the same mystery. Is it wealth that remains? Or perhaps the relationships we built over a lifetime? What about the achievements we've worked so tirelessly to attain? The Buddha often spoke of the impermanence of life, teaching that clinging to what is temporary leads to suffering. Yet, as humans, we find ourselves drawn to the illusion of permanence, investing our energy in pursuits that ultimately slip through our fingers like sand. Take a moment now to reflect. If you were to close your eyes for the final time today, what would you hold on to? What would you regret? Let us journey together through stories and wisdom, each carrying a timeless lesson to uncover what truly matters at the end of our lives. Part 1. The Illusion of Ownership Story. The farmer's treasure. In a small village surrounded by lush fields, there lived a farmer named Keshava. He was known far and wide for his wealth. His barns overflowed with grains, his treasury glittered with gold, and his lands stretched beyond what the eye could see. Keshava spent his days counting his riches and planning for more, often boasting, "I am the richest man in the land. Everything I have, I've earned with my own hands. It all belongs to me." One fateful night, a fierce storm swept through the village. By morning, his barns lay in ruins, his crops destroyed. Devastated, Keshava ran to his treasury only to find that thieves had stolen everything during the chaos. He collapsed in despair, wailing, "Everything I had is gone. My life's work is meaningless now." A wandering monk, hearing Keshava's cries, approached him. "Why do you grieve so deeply, my friend? My wealth is gone. My possessions have been taken from me," Keshava exclaimed. The monk smiled gently and said, "Were they ever truly yours? The crops grew from the earth, nourished by rain and sun. The gold came from the mines of the mountain. Even your hands, which you call your own, are borrowed from the body that will one day return to dust. Tell me, Keshava, what did you truly possess?" Stunned, Keshava realized that he had spent his life clinging to things that were never truly his. Reflection. Like Keshava, many of us believe we own the material things we accumulate: our houses, cars, and treasures. Yet, as the Buddha taught, nothing is ours. Everything we think we possess is simply borrowed from the world. The truth is that ownership is an illusion. Everything we claim as ours is subject to change, decay, or loss. The earth from which all wealth originates reclaims what we borrow. Even our bodies are merely temporary vessels, destined to return to the soil. What, then, should we value? The answer lies not in accumulating, but in cultivating. Cultivating wisdom, kindness, and inner peace. These are treasures that no storm can destroy and no thief can steal. In today's world, the illusion of ownership is even more pervasive. Social media bombards us with images of success defined by material wealth. We are told that a bigger house, a newer car, or a higher salary will bring happiness. But does it? Consider the stories of those who achieve immense wealth but remain unfulfilled. Billionaires, despite their fortunes, often speak of loneliness, stress, and a longing for purpose. This is because happiness cannot be bought. It must be cultivated within. The Buddha's teaching of impermanence reminds us that clinging to material possessions is like grasping water in our hands. It inevitably slips away. Instead of chasing what is temporary, we can focus on what brings lasting peace, compassion, mindfulness, and contentment with the present moment. As you reflect on Keshava's story, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that is not truly mine? What treasures can I cultivate within myself that will remain, even when all else fades? The journey to uncovering life's true wealth begins with letting go of the illusion of ownership. Only then can we embrace the beauty of what truly belongs to us. Our wisdom, our kindness, and the peace that comes from within. Part 2. The Fragility of Health Story. The merchant's choice. In a bustling city, there lived a wealthy merchant named Arvind. His name was synonymous with success. His shops lined the main streets, and his home was a mansion of unparalleled grandeur. Yet, despite his riches, Arvind lived in constant stress. He worked tirelessly, skipped meals, and rarely rested. One day, Arvind fell gravely ill. His doctors warned him, "Your body can no longer bear the strain. You must stop working and focus on recovery." But Arvind dismissed their advice, saying, "I have no time to rest. My business demands my attention." As the years passed, Arvind's health deteriorated further. On his deathbed, surrounded by his worried family, he whispered, "I traded my health for wealth, but now I realize my wealth cannot buy back my health." A monk visiting Arvind's home overheard these words and said gently, "Your body is the vessel that carries your soul. Neglecting it is like abandoning the boat in the middle of the ocean. Without health, even the richest treasures are meaningless." Reflection. Health is often taken for granted, especially when we are young and full of energy. We push our bodies to their limits, believing that there will always be time to rest later. But as the Buddha taught, life is uncertain. The future is not guaranteed, and neither is our health. Without health, life is not life, said the Buddha. A healthy body and mind are the foundation of all joy. Wealth, fame, and achievements pale in comparison to the simple ability to wake up each morning feeling well, to savor a meal, to walk among the trees, and to share moments with loved ones. Connecting to modern life in today's fast-paced world, we glorify busyness. Success is often measured by how much we accomplish, how many hours we work, or how full our schedules are. But at what cost? Think of the countless stories of individuals who reach the pinnacle of their careers only to find themselves battling chronic illnesses, burnout, or depression. The truth is, no amount of success can compensate for the loss of health. Caring for our health is not selfish, it is essential. Eating nourishing food, exercising, and resting are acts of self-compassion. As the Buddha taught, to keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear. As you reflect on Arvind's story, consider, how are you treating the vessel that carries you through life? Are you nurturing it with care, or are you trading it away for fleeting gain? Remember, your health is the foundation upon which all else rests. Part 3. The Bonds of Compassion Story. The carpenter's bridges. In a quiet countryside, two brothers shared neighboring farms. For years they lived in harmony, helping each other through every challenge. But one day, a small misunderstanding grew into a bitter argument. The younger brother, in anger, dug a trench between their lands, turning it into a boundary. The elder brother, hurt by the division, hired a carpenter. "Build me a fence," he said, "so I don't have to see my brother's face again." The carpenter nodded, but instead of building a fence, he constructed a beautiful wooden bridge across the trench. When the younger brother saw the bridge, he was overcome with emotion. He walked across, tears in his eyes, and said, "Brother, after all I've done, you still built a way for us to reconnect." The elder brother embraced him, saying, "It wasn't me. It was the wisdom of another." The carpenter, packing his tools, smiled and said, "I have many more bridges to build." The Buddha taught that compassion is the path to peace. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is a gift we give ourselves, a release from the chains of resentment. In life, misunderstandings and conflicts are inevitable. but the choice to hold on to them or let them go is ours. The story of the brothers reminds us that building bridges, not walls, leads to healing and harmony. In today's world, relationships are often tested by pride and ego. A harsh word, a forgotten gesture, or an unkind action can create rifts that seem insurmountable. But as the Buddha said, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. Consider how many relationships have been saved by a simple apology or a kind gesture. Compassion requires courage, the courage to put aside one's ego and extend a hand of reconciliation. Imagine a world where every conflict was met with understanding instead of anger, where bridges were built instead of barriers. This is the world the Buddha envisioned, a world where love and compassion prevail. As you reflect on the Carpenter's Bridge, ask yourself, are there walls in your life that need to become bridges? What relationships could be healed through a simple act of compassion? Remember, in the end, it is the bonds we share with others that bring true joy and meaning to life. Part 4. The Power of Presence. The pebble in the stream. One day, a disciple came to the Buddha with a troubled heart. "Master," he said, "I cannot find peace. My mind is always racing, filled with regrets about the past and worries about the future. How can I ever be calm?" The Buddha handed him a pebble and led him to a quiet stream. "Drop this pebble into the water," the Buddha instructed, "and watch closely." The disciple did as told, and ripples spread across the stream, disturbing its surface. The Buddha explained, "This stream is your mind, and the pebble is your thoughts of the past and future. When you cling to them, your mind becomes restless. Now let the water settle." The disciple waited and watched as the ripples disappeared, leaving the water calm and clear. "See," said the Buddha, "when you let go of clinging, your mind becomes still. Peace lies not in the past or future, but in the present moment." Reflection. The Buddha often spoke about mindfulness, the art of living fully in the present. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment, yet for many of us, the present feels elusive. We carry the weight of yesterday's mistakes and the fear of tomorrow's uncertainties, forgetting that life unfolds only in the here and now. The ripples in the stream are a metaphor for our restless minds. By letting go of regrets and anxieties, we create space for clarity, peace, and joy. In today's fast-paced world, distractions are everywhere. Phones buzz with notifications, calendars overflow with appointments, and our minds juggle endless to-do lists. But amidst this chaos, how often do we pause to simply be? Practicing mindfulness doesn't require grand gestures. It can be as simple as savoring a cup of tea, feeling the warmth of the sun on your skin, or taking a deep breath and noticing the present moment. As the Buddha taught, the trouble is, you think you have time, but time is fleeting, and the only time we truly have is now. As you reflect on the pebble in the stream, ask yourself, how often do I truly live in the present? What simple joys am I overlooking because I am lost in thought? Remember, the power of presence is the key to a peaceful and meaningful life. Part 5. Happiness and Simplicity Story. The Tea Master's Secret. In a quiet mountain village, there lived a tea master known for his wisdom and serenity. Travelers from afar sought his guidance, curious about the secret to his happiness. One day, a wealthy merchant visited him, asking, "Master, I have everything: wealth, power, and success, but I feel empty. What is the secret to happiness?" The tea master smiled and invited the merchant to sit. He brewed a pot of tea, pouring it into a small cup until it overflowed. "Master," the merchant exclaimed, "the cup is full. It can hold no more." The tea master replied, "And so it is with your life. You are so full of desires and ambitions that there is no room for contentment. Empty your cup, and you will discover happiness in simplicity." The merchant, humbled, thanked the tea master and began to reevaluate his life. Reflection. The Buddha taught that contentment, not abundance, is the key to happiness. Health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth, and faithfulness the best relationship. Modern life often equates happiness with having more money, possessions, or achievements. Yet those who seek fulfillment in material things often find themselves yearning for something deeper. Happiness lies not in what we have, but in how we perceive it. A simple meal shared with loved ones, a walk in nature, or a moment of gratitude can bring more joy than the grandest luxuries. In the age of consumerism, we are bombarded with messages that tell us we need more to be happy. A bigger house, a better car, a newer gadget. These promises of happiness often lead to endless striving and dissatisfaction. But studies show that beyond meeting basic needs, additional wealth has little impact on happiness. True joy comes from experiences, connections, and a sense of purpose. Practicing gratitude can transform our perspective. By appreciating what we have, we shift our focus from lack to abundance. As the Tea Master demonstrated, happiness begins when we empty our cup and make room for simplicity. As you reflect on the Tea Master's story, ask yourself, what can I let go of to make space for joy? How can I embrace simplicity in my daily life? Remember, happiness is not about having more, it's about needing less and cherishing what you already have. Part 6. The Impermanence of Life Story. The wilting flower in an ancient kingdom. A powerful king feared the inevitability of death. He summoned the wisest sage in the land and asked, "How can I achieve immortality? What must I do to ensure that my life will never end?" The sage handed the king a delicate flower and said, "Keep this flower alive forever, and you shall live forever." The king took great care of the flower, appointing the best gardeners and creating the perfect conditions for its survival. Yet, despite all his efforts, the flower began to wither. Panicked, the king called the sage. "This flower is dying despite everything I've done," the king exclaimed. The Buddha taught that impermanence, anicca, is a fundamental truth of existence. Everything that arises will one day pass away: our possessions, our relationships, and even our lives. While this truth may seem daunting, it carries a profound lesson: to value each moment, knowing it is fleeting. Impermanence is not a cause for despair, but a call to live with intention. It reminds us to cherish our loved ones, to pursue meaningful work, and to find joy in the present moment. As the Buddha said, all compounded things are impermanent. Strive on with diligence. In a world that moves at lightning speed, we often forget to appreciate the transient beauty of life. The bloom of a flower, a child's laughter, or the quiet of a sunset, all are fleeting, yet profoundly beautiful. By embracing impermanence, we can free ourselves from the fear of loss and the trap of attachment. Instead of clinging to what we cannot keep, we can focus on creating moments of connection, compassion, and gratitude. As you reflect on the wilting flower, ask yourself, what beauty in my life am I overlooking because I fear it's impermanent? How can I embrace life's fleeting nature and find joy in the present? Remember, it is not the length of life, but its depth that truly matters. At the end of life, what truly remains? It is not our wealth, for that belongs to the earth. It is not our achievements, for they are claimed by time. It is not even our bodies, for they return to dust. What remains are the intangible treasures we cultivate, the kindness we share, the love we give, and the wisdom we pass on. The Buddha's teachings guide us to focus on what truly matters. Health is the foundation of a fulfilling life. Presence allows us to savor each moment. Compassion bridges the divides that separate us. Simplicity brings contentment, and impermanence teaches us to live with intention. A final story. The lamp and the flame. A disciple once asked the Buddha Master, "How can I leave a lasting impact on the world when I am but one small flame in the vast arena?" The Buddha took the disciple to a room filled with unlit lamps and said, "Light each lamp with your flame." The disciple did so, and soon the entire room was illuminated. The Buddha smiled and said, "Your flame does not diminish by lighting another's lamp. Instead, it grows brighter. In this way, your kindness and wisdom will live on even after you are gone. As we journey through life, let us remember to be the flame that lights the way for others. Let us nurture our health, cherish our connections, and live fully in the present. At the end of our lives, it will not be the things we own that matter, but the love we gave, the peace we found, and the light we brought into the world. May we all strive to live with compassion, mindfulness, and gratitude. so that when our time comes, we can look back with no regrets, only the quiet joy of a life well lived. Thank you for it. May you find peace and fulfillment on your journey. The greatest treasures at 50, not wealth, but 4 essential virtues. A reflection on life's true wealth. What is the true measure of wealth? Is it the grandeur of our homes or the peace within our hearts? Dear listener, life is a fleeting journey. From birth to our 50 seconds, we travel through youth, ambition, and wisdom. By the time we reach 50, we often begin to realize that the treasures we once chased, the titles, possessions, and status, may not hold the happiness we thought they would. Instead, true wealth lies in intangible treasures: health, family, financial stability, and inner peace. In this reflection, let us explore the greatest assets of life at 50 through stories, lessons, and wisdom rooted in Buddhist philosophy. As the Buddha taught, all things are impermanent, and clinging to material possessions only brings suffering. Today, we journey through this realization together. Health, the foundation of all joy. Without health, even a mountain of gold is of no value. Story 1. The lesson of the sick monk. Once, a devoted monk fell ill. Despite his condition, he continued meditating and teaching others. His disciples, concerned for his health, asked, "Master, why do you not rest? Does not the Buddha teach us to care for our bodies?" The monk smiled and replied, "This body is a vessel, a means to enlightenment. If it is neglected, the journey ends prematurely. Yet if cared for with mindfulness, it serves well." Over time, the monk recovered, and his message remained clear. The body is sacred not for vanity, but as a temple for the spirit. Analysis. Health is a treasure. At 50, health becomes a pivotal concern. The Buddha often spoke of mindfulness in caring for both body and mind. As impermanence, anicca, teaches us, the body ages, but with proper care through balanced nutrition, exercise, and mental well-being, we can reduce suffering. Without health, we burden not only ourselves but also our loved ones. A healthy body allows us to experience joy, serve others, and face life's uncertainties with strength. Family, the sanctuary of love and support. The bonds of family are not mere ties of blood, but of love and understanding. Story 2. The farmer's gratitude. In a small village, a farmer lived with his elderly parents, wife, and children. The farmer worked tirelessly but always returned home to eat with his family. One day, a wealthy merchant visited and said, "Why do you not expand your fields and increase your wealth?" The farmer replied, "My family is my wealth. What use is gold if I cannot share it with those I love?" Years later, when drought struck, the merchant lost everything. But the farmer's family thrived, not in riches but in togetherness. Analysis. Family as a treasure, family, like a garden, requires care, patience, and love. The Buddha taught that loving kindness, metta, begins at home. At 50, we often see our roles in the family shift. We may become caregivers to aging parents or mentors to grown children. True family wealth lies not in possessions but in harmony. A family that supports each other weathers all storms. When we prioritize family, we embody compassion and create a lasting legacy. Financial stability, independence, and dignity. Wealth, like water, should flow wisely, nourishing, and not flooding. Story 3. The greedy merchant. There was a merchant who hoarded his wealth, refusing to spend even for his needs. As he aged, illness struck, and his wealth brought him no comfort. When he passed away, his children squandered his fortune, leaving nothing of his legacy. In contrast, a humble potter saved a portion of his earnings, ensuring a simple but secure life. He taught his children generosity and wisdom, and his modest wealth supported his family for generations. Analysis. Financial wisdom. Buddhist teachings on right livelihood, Amma Ajiva, remind us to earn and use wealth ethically. At 50, financial stability means independence and the ability to support ourselves without burdening others. This does not mean hoarding or overindulgence, but striking a balance, saving for needs, giving generously, and living simply. Money, when used mindfully, becomes a tool for good. 4. Inner peace, the ultimate treasure. Peace comes not from escaping life, but from understanding it. Story 4. The Bamboo Grove. A disciple once asked the Buddha, "Master, how can I find peace when life is full of suffering?" The Buddha pointed to a bamboo grove and said, "See how the bamboo sways with the wind, neither resisting nor breaking. Be like the bamboo. Accept life's flow, and you will find peace." Through meditation and mindfulness, the disciple learned to let go of attachments and found joy in the present moment. Analysis. Cultivating inner peace. Inner peace comes from understanding impermanence and the nature of suffering. Dukkha. At 50, many of us face regrets, anxieties, or unfulfilled dreams. The Buddhist teachings on mindfulness and acceptance guide us to release these burdens. Through practices like meditation and gratitude, we learn that peace lies not in changing the world, but in changing how we see it. A calm mind transforms challenges into opportunities for growth. Conclusion. Embracing the 4 treasures. Happiness is not found in what we own, but in what we cherish. At 50, life offers a profound opportunity to reflect, recalibrate, and embrace what truly matters. Health, family, financial stability, and inner peace are the pillars of a fulfilling life. They align with the Buddhist teachings of moderation, compassion, and mindfulness. As we journey forward, let us remember, care for your body as the temple of your spirit. Nurture your family with love and understanding. Manage your resources wisely to maintain dignity and independence. Cultivate peace within, for it is the root of all joy. May this reflection inspire you to cherish the treasures. Leave with gratitude. It is sender resource and wherever you try. Thank you for listening, and may you find peace on your journey. The warm embrace of family. Living with loved ones. Living with family in old age is often seen as a natural choice, especially in cultures that value multi-generational households. It promises warmth, care, and connection. Yet, sharing a home across generations also brings challenges that test patience and understanding. As the Buddha taught, to live in harmony, one must first understand the causes of discord. The 2 kitchens, Mrs. and had always dreamed of living out her golden years surrounded by her children and grandchildren. When her son, Hugh, and his wife invited her to live with them, she accepted eagerly, imagining evenings filled with laughter and shared meals. At first, her presence brought a comforting rhythm to the household. She cooked traditional dishes, told her grandchildren bedtime stories, and kept the house filled with the aromas of her youth. But as months passed, tensions began to simmer, and insisted on traditional ways of doing things, using herbal remedies for minor illnesses and cooking elaborate meals every evening. Hugh's wife, Mao, who worked full-time, preferred efficiency over tradition. A subtle battle began to brew in the kitchen, where Anne's slow, methodical ways clashed with Maui's quick, modern approach. One evening, after a disagreement over how to prepare a meal, Anne retreated to her room, feeling hurt and out of place. That night, she remembered a Buddhist story she had heard long ago about a potter and a farmer who quarreled over their shared well. The lesson was clear. Attachment to my way creates walls, while compromise builds bridges. The next morning, Anne spoke to May with an open heart. "We're different, but we both want this family to thrive. Let's make it easier for each other." They decided to set up 2 small kitchens, one for Anne's traditional cooking and one for May's quick meals. With this simple adjustment, peace returned to the household. Mrs. N's story teaches that living with family in old age requires flexibility and mutual respect. The Buddhist principle of non-attachment reminds us to let go of rigid expectations and meet others with compassion. Family life flourishes when love is greater than the desire to be right. 2. The path of solitude. Living independently. For some, living independently in old age is not a rejection of family, but an embrace of autonomy. It allows elders to maintain their routines, explore their interests, and live without feeling like a burden. As the Buddha said, each being must find their own path, yet no one walks alone. Story. The house by the river. Mr. San, a retired fisherman, chose to live alone in a modest house by the river after his children moved to the city. "Come stay with us," they urged, worried about his safety and loneliness. But Than smiled and said, "The river has been my companion for decades. It's where I belong." Every morning, Than meditated by the water, the rhythmic flow reminding him of life's impermanence. He spent his days fishing, mending nets, and tending to his small vegetable garden. While his children called often and visited when they could, Than relished the quietude of his solitary life. One evening, a young villager named Bio came to seek Than's advice. "I'm torn," Bio admitted. "Should I follow my family's wishes or pursue my dream of becoming a carpenter?" Than led Bio to the riverbank and handed him a stone. "Throw it in the water," he said. As Bio did, ripples spread across the surface. "See how the stone creates ripples without disturbing the river's flow. Your life is the stone. The river is your family's love. You can make your choices, and their love will remain." Bio left feeling lighter, and Than felt a quiet pride in knowing he still contributed to the community in meaningful ways. His independence had given him not just freedom but clarity, allowing him to support his family and others without losing himself. Mr. Than's life embodies the Buddhist teaching of anicca impermanence. Living independently in old age is a way of honoring the self while recognizing that love does not diminish with distance. True freedom comes from embracing both solitude and connection without clinging to either. Reflection, balancing togetherness and solitude. The first two parts of this journey explore the contrasting paths of living with family and living independently. Each has its joys and challenges, but both require the wisdom to adapt, the courage to let go of attachments, and the compassion to nurture relationships. Whether shared under one roof or across distances, the essence of these choices lies in understanding and love. 3. A new community, the option of retirement homes. For some, moving into a retirement home represents not loss, but a new beginning. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of connection not just to family, but to a larger community. Retirement homes offer elders the opportunity to find companionship and purpose while freeing their children from feelings of guilt or obligation. Story: Mrs. Ho's circle of friends. Mrs. Hoa had always been a spirited woman, full of energy and laughter. When her husband passed away, she lived with her youngest son's family. While they cared for her lovingly, she noticed their increasing strain as their lives grew busier. One day, her granddaughter accidentally blurted, "Grandma, why do you have to live with us? We never have time to play with you anymore." The comment stung, but it also brought clarity. Mrs. Hoa realized she wanted more than just being present in someone else's busy home. She wanted a life filled with companionship and joy. With her family's support, she decided to move into a retirement community. At first, her children were apprehensive, fearing she might feel abandoned. But when they visited her weeks later, they found her leading a gardening club and participating in yoga classes. Her days were filled with laughter, conversations, and new friendships. "When you cling to one branch," she told her daughter during a visit, "you may never see the beauty of the whole tree." Here, I found not just care, but a forest of connections. Mrs. Ho even began hosting meditation circles, introducing Buddhist teachings on compassion and gratitude to her fellow residents. She found that living in a community where everyone faced similar stages of life created an atmosphere of mutual understanding and support. Mrs. Ho's story illustrates that moving to a retirement home is not about abandonment, but about embracing a new kind of interdependence. The Buddhist principle of metta-loving kindness teaches us that care and connection can be cultivated beyond familial ties. In old age, a supportive community can be a source of joy and renewal. 4. The challenge of generational differences. Living arrangements across generations often bring both comfort and conflict. The Buddha taught that misunderstanding arises when we fail to see things from another's perspective. Old age offers the opportunity to practice empathy, patience, and compromise, transforming potential discord into harmony. Story: The Divided Table. Mr. Thieu, a retired carpenter, moved in with his eldest daughter, Lin, and her family after his wife passed away. Lin welcomed him warmly, grateful to have her father close. At first, the arrangement brought a sense of completeness, meals shared together, stories told late into the night. But as the months passed, small disagreements began to surface. Mr. Fuse was accustomed to quiet meals, savoring every bite mindfully, while Line's family often ate quickly, juggling conversations about school and work. He felt hurt, interpreting their hurried meals as a lack of respect. Meanwhile, Lynn felt her father was too critical of their modern lifestyle. One evening, after an especially tense dinner, Line's teenage son said, "Grandpa, why don't you like how we live?" The words lingered, heavy with misunderstanding. The next day, Line and her father sat together over tea. "Dad," she began gently, "we live differently, but it doesn't mean we love you any less. Can we find a way to meet in the middle?" Inspired by her openness, Mr. Fuck shared a Buddhist teaching he cherished. Harmony arises when we let go of our need to control and instead seek to understand. They decided to make small changes, setting one evening a week for a traditional family meal and allowing other nights to follow the family's faster pace. The story of Mr. Fuse and Line reminds us of the Buddhist principle of right understanding. Bridging generational gaps requires seeing beyond our own preferences to appreciate others' perspectives. Living in harmony is not about erasing differences but embracing them with compassion and flexibility. 5. The shared journey supporting each other in old age. Buddhist teachings emphasize interbeing, the interconnectedness of all lives. In old age, this principle becomes even more profound. Whether living with family, friends, or neighbors, mutual support transforms life into a shared journey. It is not about dependency, but about finding strength and togetherness. Story: the neighbor's net, Mrs. Bine lived in a small village on the outskirts of Hanoi. Her home was modest, her days simple, but her heart was vast. At 65, her children had moved to the city, and though they visited often, she spent most of her time alone. One rainy afternoon, her neighbor, Mr. Dung, knocked on her door. In his hands was a torn fishing net. "Mrs. Bin," he said, "I've tried to fix this, but my eyesight isn't what it used to be. Could you help?" Bin welcomed him in, spreading the net across her table. Together, they worked for hours, their laughter mingling with the sound of the rain. As they finished, Dung said, "You have such steady hands, like the river itself." From that day, the two neighbors began to share their days. Bin helped Dung with his nets and gardening while Dung repaired her roof and carried heavy loads. They started a small community garden, inviting others in the village to join. Soon, what began as a simple act of mending grew into a network of shared care. One evening, Bin reflected, "We are like this net. Each thread is fragile, but together we are strong enough to hold the weight of the world." The story of Mrs. Bin and Mr. Dung exemplifies the Buddhist teaching of dependent origination, that all beings rely on each other. In old age, supporting and being supported creates a life of purpose and connection. True wealth lies in the bonds we weave with others. 6. The ultimate answer: finding peace within. The question, who should you live with in old age, often points outward to family, friends, or communities. Yet, Buddhist philosophy teaches that peace is found not in external arrangements but within the mind and heart. Living mindfully, whether alone or with others, is the key to a contented old age. Story: the empty bench. Mr. Nam, an 80-year-old retired teacher, lived in a small house by the sea. His wife had passed away, and his children lived abroad. Many in the village wondered how he could seem so serene, spending his days walking along the shore and sitting on a bench overlooking the waves. One curious young man finally asked him, "Don't you feel lonely, sitting here by yourself?" Nam smiled gently and replied, "Loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from not knowing how to be with yourself. This bench isn't empty. It is full of the lessons the ocean teaches me every day." The young man frowned, not understanding. Nam continued, "The waves rise and fall, but the ocean remains. Just as our emotions come and go, the peaceful mind remains steady. If you can sit with yourself, you can find peace anywhere." Nam practiced mindfulness daily, letting go of regrets about the past and worries about the future. His home was not defined by walls, but by the vast space of his awareness. He maintained a close bond with his children, even from afar, writing letters filled with wisdom and love. Mr. Nam's story reflects the Buddhist teaching of anatta, the non-self. True peace comes not from where or with whom we live, but from living mindfully and embracing impermanence. In old age, cultivating inner peace allows us to find joy in every moment, no matter the circumstances. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine as Min, an elderly man with a life of hard-earned wisdom etched into his lined face, sat on the veranda of his modest home. His children had gathered that evening at his request, their chatter filling the house. For Min, the sight of his 3 children together brought a rare sense of fulfillment. Yet beneath the warmth of their laughter, an unspoken tension lingered, a tension he was too hopeful to notice. Ming had spent his entire life building a secure future for his family. Every brick of the home they sat in, every grain of rice they ate, had been the fruit of his labor. His wife, gone for over a decade, had been his partner in this endeavor. Together, they had dreamed of a united family, their children thriving under the foundation of love and sacrifice they had laid. "I've made a decision," Minch began, his voice steady but soft. His children turned to him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I've decided to divide my assets among you while I'm still alive." A murmur rippled through the room. His eldest son, Dewey, leaned forward. "Father, you don't need to do that now. You should keep it for yourself." Minch smiled, brushing off Dewey's words. "I have enough to live comfortably. What matters to me is that you 3 have what you need to secure your futures." Though the Buddha teaches non-attachment, Min's gesture was deeply tied to his hope for harmony. He believed that by sharing his wealth, he would cement the bonds between his children and ensure they remained a united family. Yet, this hope, like a fragile thread, was bound to the illusion that material wealth could sustain love. Over the next week, Minch worked meticulously to finalize the division of his assets. His home, a small sum of savings, and a piece of farmland were distributed equally. He chose to live with his youngest son, Tuan, believing that his presence would bring comfort and wisdom to the household. For a brief moment, Min felt at peace. But the seeds of attachment he had unknowingly sown began to sprout in silence. At first, Min's life in Tuan's home seemed tranquil. His grandchildren's laughter filled the house, and his daughter-in-law, Lin, greeted him warmly. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the warmth began to cool. Small gestures of care grew sparse, replaced by hurried exchanges and strained smiles. One evening, Min sat at the dinner table, his plate set slightly apart from the others. As the family ate, he noticed Lin's gaze lingering on him, her expression unreadable. When the meal was over, she spoke to Tuan in hushed tones, her words faint but sharp. "Your father is kind, but it's not easy having him here all the time. We have our own lives," Minch pretended not to hear, but her words echoed in his mind. He thought of the Buddhist teaching. Suffering arises from clinging to what is not ours to hold. Had he clung too tightly to the belief that his presence would bring joy? The next day, Tuan approached Min with an uneasy smile. "Father, perhaps it would be good for you to visit Dewey for a while. He's been asking about you." Min agreed, masking his hurt with a gentle nod. He packed his belongings and moved into Dewey's home, but the cycle repeated itself. Though welcomed initially, his presence soon became an unspoken inconvenience. He overheard conversations about the cost of caring for him, about the sacrifices each sibling was expected to make. Min's heart, once filled with hope, now felt heavy with disappointment. He remembered a saying from his late wife: "A mirror reflects the truth of what stands before it." His children, once his pride, now mirrored the unintended consequences of his choices. The Buddhist teaching on karma weighed on Min's thoughts. The seeds we plant today shape the harvest we reap tomorrow. He had given his children everything, but in doing so, had he failed to teach them the value of gratitude? The wealth he divided had become a source of division rather than unity. Late one night, as Min sat alone, he gazed at the moonlight spilling through the window. He whispered to himself, "Perhaps I gave them too much," believing it would bring us closer. But love cannot be bought, even with the best of intentions. Lesson: the bonds of family cannot be strengthened by material gifts alone. When love is tied to possessions, it becomes fragile, like a reflection in a fractured mirror. Minji's journey reminds us that true harmony arises from shared values and mutual respect. not from the distribution of wealth. Min sat beneath the shade of a banyan tree, the cool breeze brushing against his weathered face. He had come to this park often as a younger man, finding solace in its stillness. Now, with his possessions scattered among his children and his sense of belonging uncertain, Min sought clarity. The teachings of the Buddha resonated deeply in his heart. All that arises will pass away. Clinging to the fleeting is the root of suffering. He reflected on his life and the choices he had made. From his youth, Min believed that his sacrifices would ensure the unity and prosperity of his family. Yet, here he was, shuffled between his children like an unwanted burden. He thought of his late wife and their shared dreams of a harmonious family. "Have I failed her?" he whispered, his voice heavy with regret, as Min sat and thought. An elderly monk passed by, noticing the sorrow etched on his face. "May I join you, my friend?" the monk asked gently. Min nodded, grateful for the company. They spoke of life and family, and Min poured out his story, his voice trembling with emotion. The monk listened intently, his expression calm yet empathetic. When Min finished, the monk said, "You have given your children the material tools to build their lives, but you must ask yourself, did you also give them the tools to nurture their hearts?" The monk's words struck a chord. Min realized that while he had worked tirelessly to provide for his family, he had placed too much faith in material wealth as a means of securing love and gratitude. The monk continued, "The Buddha teaches us that impermanence is not a curse, but a gift. It reminds us to cherish each moment and let go of what no longer serves us." Minj asked, "But how can I let go of my family? They are my everything." The monk smiled. Letting go does not mean abandoning love. It means releasing the expectation that love must be returned in a certain way. When you let go of these chains, your love becomes free, boundless, and pure. Min nodded slowly, the weight of the monk's words sinking in. He realized that his suffering stemmed not from his children's actions alone, but from his own attachments to how he believed they should act. That day, beneath the banyan tree, Min made a vow to live not with expectations, but with acceptance. Less impermanence teaches us to value the present without clinging to the past or future. Min's awakening reminds us that love, when freed from expectations, can bring peace even in the face of disappointment. Embracing his newfound understanding, Min began to shift his focus from seeking validation to living with intention. He moved to a small, humble house on the edge of the village. Though the space was modest, it was his own sanctuary where he could reflect and rebuild his spirit. Min spent his days tending to a small garden, planting vegetables and flowers. The physical work grounded him, and the sight of new life sprouting from the soil brought him quiet joy. One afternoon, a neighbor named Lan visited him. She was a single mother struggling to make ends meet, her face lined with worry. Min welcomed her warmly and offered her a cup of tea. As they talked, Lan shared her struggles of balancing work and raising her children. Min listened intently, offering words of encouragement and empathy. He recognized in her the resilience he once saw in himself, and his heart swelled with a desire to help. The next day, Min brought Lan a basket of fresh vegetables from his garden. "These are for your family," he said with a smile. Lan's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the gift. "Thank you, Uncle Min," she said. "Your kindness means more than you know." The Buddhist teaching on karma came to Min's mind. Our actions create ripples that extend beyond what we can see. A single act of kindness can touch countless lives. For the first time in years, Min felt a sense of purpose that was not tied to his children or his possessions. He realized that giving, when done selflessly, brought a joy far greater than any material wealth could provide. Word of Min's generosity spread through the village. People began visiting him, seeking advice, sharing their burdens, or simply enjoying his company. Though his children remained distant, Min found a new family in the community. Each connection, each shared moment, reminded him of the boundless nature of compassion. One evening, as Min sat by the fire, he wrote a letter to his children. In it, he shared the lessons he had learned. "My dear children," he wrote, "I once believed that giving you my wealth would secure our bond. But I see now that love cannot be bought or demanded. It must be cultivated like a garden, with patience and care. I have no anger in my heart, only the hope that you will find the joy of giving without expectation." The letter was simple but heartfelt, a reflection of the peace Min had found within himself. He sent it without seeking a response, knowing that his words would plant seeds of understanding in their own time. Lesson: the karma of compassion teaches us that true wealth lies not in what we possess, but in the kindness we share. Min's journey reminds us that by giving selflessly, we can create ripples of joy and connection that extend far beyond ourselves. The years had turned Min's hair white and his back slightly hunched, but his spirit was lighter than it had been in decades. His simple life, marked by moments of connection with the villagers and the quiet rhythm of his days, had brought him an inner peace he had not known before. Yet, a letter from his eldest son, Dewey, reopened a chapter Min had hoped was resolved. "Father," the letter began, "we've been thinking of you and hope you're well. We'd like to visit and discuss some family matters." Min set the letter down, his hands steady despite the undercurrent of unease. Over the years, his children had seldom written, and when they did, it was usually tied to matters of inheritance or responsibility. The Buddha's words echoed in his mind, clinging to what is not truly ours blinds us to what is eternal. When his children arrived days later, they found Min sitting by the garden, his face serene. They embraced him warmly, but Min could sense the weight of unspoken concerns. As they sat for tea, Dewey finally spoke. "Father, we've been thinking about the family home. It's not being used, and we were wondering if it might be sold so we can use the proceeds to support our children's education." The request, though polite, carried an assumption that many would agree. He listened carefully, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. "The family home," Min began, "was built not for wealth but for memories. It was never mine to give nor yours to own. It belongs to the moments we shared as a family, and those cannot be sold." His children exchanged glances, surprised by his response. Min continued, his voice gentle but firm. "The Buddha teaches us that attachment to ownership is an illusion. We come into this world with nothing and leave with nothing. What matters is not what we claim to possess, but the love and values we cultivate." Dewey's face softened, and his siblings grew quiet. For the first time in years, they saw their father not as a provider, but as a man who had carried the weight of their family's hopes and dreams. Minch did not refuse their request outright, but his words planted a seed of reflection. That evening, Min walked alone under the stars. He whispered to himself, "I cannot carry their burdens for them, but I can show them the way to lighten their hearts." Lesson: the illusion of ownership binds us to impermanence. Min's wisdom reminds us that true legacy lies not in material possessions, but in the values and memories we leave behind. Months passed, and Min's health began to decline. He remained at peace, his heart unburdened by regret. His days were filled with quiet reflection, tending to his garden and the occasional visit from villagers who sought his advice or simply his comforting presence. One day, Minch felt a sharp pain in his chest. Though the villagers urged him to seek medical care, he declined. "The body is like a leaf," he said softly. "It flourishes, it withers, and it returns to the earth. This is the natural order." Min called for his children, asking them to gather at his home. When they arrived, they found him sitting in his favorite chair, a faint smile on his face. He greeted them warmly, as if no time had passed since their last meeting. "I have called you here," Min said, "not to divide what I leave behind, but to share what I have learned." He handed each of them a letter, written in his steady handwriting, "My dear children." The letter began, "Life is a river that flows unceasingly. We cannot hold on to the water, nor can we force it to flow in a direction of our choosing. The only way to find peace is to flow with it, embracing each moment without clinging to the past or fearing the future." He continued aloud, "You have been my greatest teachers, showing me the power of love, the pain of expectation, and the joy of letting go. I have no wealth to leave you, but I give you the wisdom that has brought me peace. Let go of what does not serve you. Cultivate kindness, for it is the only treasure that endures." As Min's voice faded, his children sat in silence, tears streaming down their faces. For the first time, they understood the depth of his love, not tied to wealth or obligation, but rooted in compassion and acceptance. When Minch passed away that evening, his children honored his memory by gathering the villagers for a simple ceremony. They spoke not of his possessions but of his wisdom, recounting the lessons he had taught them through his life. Years later, Min's letters remained with his children, their pages worn from being read and reread. Each time they faced a challenge, they would turn to his words, finding solace in his teachings. Lesson: the only lasting legacy is the wisdom we impart and the love we share. Min's journey reminds us that true wealth lies not in what we leave behind, but in the lives we touch and the values we uphold. Through Min's journey, we see the transformative power of impermanence, compassion, and acceptance. His story teaches us that life's true treasures cannot be held in our hands, but only in our heart. By letting go of attachments and embracing the present, we create a legacy of love and wisdom that transcends time. Attachment is the root of suffering. Buddha Thien sat quietly in the corner of the bustling family home, his cane resting against the arm of his chair. Around him, his son's family moved about with the hurried energy of modern life, voices rising, plates clattering, and the hum of a television filling the air. Yet, in the midst of this activity, Thien felt an emptiness that no noise could mask. Years earlier, Thien had dreamed of this phase of life. He imagined evenings spent telling stories to his grandchildren, mornings sipping tea with his son, and an unspoken harmony between generations. Yet, reality had proved different. His daughter-in-law's smiles were thin and perfunctory, her words tinged with an irritation she tried and often failed to conceal. His grandchildren barely looked up from their screens to greet him, and his son, always busy, rarely shared more than a brief conversation. One evening, Thien overheard his daughter-in-law complaining to her husband. "He's old, yes, but does he need to be here all the time? We have our own lives, our own needs. It's exhausting." Her words pierced him. He wasn't angry. He understood that life had its pressures, but the realization settled heavily in his chest. He was no longer the father who provided or the pillar who held the family steady. Instead, he had become an obligation, a weight they silently bore. Sitting on the veranda that night, watching the moon cast its light across the courtyard, Thien reflected on his feelings. The wind carried the faint scent of jasmine, a reminder of the days when he and his late wife had planted the flowers together. He whispered softly to himself, "This is impermanence. Nothing lasts, not love, not youth, not even family." For a moment, his heart ached, but he caught himself. He remembered the Buddhist teachings. Dukkha, suffering, arises from attachment. Hadn't he clung too tightly to the idea of family, imagining it as an eternal refuge? He realized that his expectations had chained him to a fleeting reality. The next morning, Thien began to change. He no longer waited for his son's attention or hoped for his daughter-in-law's approval. Instead, he focused on his own well-being. He joined a local meditation group, spending his mornings in quiet contemplation. In the afternoons, he walked to the temple to offer incense and prayers, finding solace in the rhythm of spiritual practice. Lesson: dependence on others, even family, can lead to disillusionment. As the Buddha taught, everything in life is transient. By letting go of expectations and seeking peace within, we free ourselves from the pain of unmet desires. To keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our mind strong and clear. Buddha at 68, Lin felt the weight of years pressing on her body. Once vibrant and active, she now struggled to rise from bed without her knees protesting. Her back ached after standing too long, and the stairs in her daughter's home seemed steeper with every passing day. Lin had moved in with her daughter after her husband passed away, thinking it would bring comfort to both. At first, it was a harmonious arrangement. She cared for her grandchildren, cooked meals, and felt a sense of purpose. But over time, she noticed a shift. Her daughter, once warm and grateful, began to seem distant. The grandchildren grew impatient with her slow movements, and she overheard her son-in-law muttering about the costs of extra groceries. One afternoon, after a particularly sharp comment from her daughter about being a financial burden, Lin retreated to her room. She sat by the window, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea. Tears welled in her eyes, not from anger, but from a profound sadness. Looking outside, she saw an old neighbor walking briskly down the street, her steps purposeful and her posture straight. Lin remembered that the woman, despite being older, had always maintained her health through daily exercise and a simple diet. Lin thought about her own choices, the fried snacks she enjoyed, the long hours sitting idle, and the way she'd ignored her body's warnings for years. That evening, Lin resolved to change. She began waking up early to stretch and meditate. Even if her joints protested at first, she replaced heavy, oily foods with fresh vegetables and soups. She also made time to walk in the nearby park, where the trees stood tall and unyielding, a reminder of nature's quiet strength. At first, the changes were small and challenging. Her legs felt stiff, and her breath came in short gasps, but Lin persisted. Slowly, she found that her energy returned. Her steps grew lighter, her aches diminished, and a newfound clarity settled over her mind. Her daughter noticed the transformation. "Mother, you look stronger these days," she said one morning, her voice softer than it had been in months. Lin smiled, not with pride, but with a quiet understanding. "I've learned to care for myself, my dear. It is the least I can do for myself and for those I love." Lesson: the body is a temple, and its care is a sacred duty. As the Buddha taught, physical health is essential for mental and spiritual clarity. By nurturing our bodies with mindfulness, we not only extend our lives, but also enhance the quality of each moment. Nothing is forever, except change. The quiet hum of a summer afternoon filled Min's home as he sat in his study, staring at a photo from years ago. It was a family portrait taken during a festive gathering. His children, then young and full of laughter, sat beside him, while his wife stood behind with a gentle smile. Now, the house was quiet, filled with luxury but devoid of the warmth he once cherished. Miyai had worked tirelessly throughout his life, ensuring that his children had every opportunity. He built a thriving business, purchased a grand home, and supported his family in every way possible. Yet, as the years passed, the bonds he thought were unbreakable began to fray. His children, now adults, rarely visited unless there was a financial matter to discuss. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving a void that even the finest material possessions could not fill. Minch often sat in his expansive living room, surrounded by silence, wondering where he had gone wrong. One day, an old friend, Deo, came to visit. Deo, in stark contrast, lived a simple life in a modest cottage. Despite this, he exuded a calm and contentment that puzzled me. "Dio," Min asked as they sipped tea. "You have so little compared to what I built. How is it that you seem happier than me?" Deo smiled, his face serene. "Mine, you have misunderstood permanence. You built your happiness on things that were never meant to last: wealth, possessions, even relationships. These are like sandcastles, beautiful, but washed away by time. True joy comes from accepting the impermanence of life and finding peace within." The words lingered in Min's mind long after Dao left. He began to reflect on his life, realizing how much energy he had spent clinging to the illusion of control. Slowly, Minch made changes. He donated much of his wealth to causes he believed in, started volunteering at a local orphanage, and reconnected with old friends. Though his children still visited infrequently, he no longer felt bitterness. Instead, he cherished the moments they shared, however brief. Lesson: the Buddhist teachings on impermanence remind us to release attachment to the fleeting. Happiness cannot be built on transient things. It must come from acceptance and a deeper connection to life's truth. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Buddha sat by the window of her small apartment, watching the rain streak down the glass. It was a quiet evening, and her thoughts wandered to her younger years. Back then, her days were filled with the relentless demands of motherhood, household responsibilities, and the constant effort to meet everyone's needs. She had given everything: her time, her energy, and even her dreams for her family. Now, in her 60s, she realized she had little left for herself. Her children were grown, busy with their own lives. They loved her, but their visits were sporadic and often rushed. She didn't blame them. She had taught them to prioritize their responsibilities. but there was a growing void in her heart, a sense of being lost, unmoored from her own identity. One day while visiting the local temple, Hoa listened to a monk speaking about compassion. "We often think of compassion as something we give to others," he said. "But how can we offer what we do not have? To truly love others, we must first love ourselves." His words struck a chord. Hoa realized she had spent her life pouring from an empty cup, neglecting her own needs and desires. Inspired, she decided to make a change, not to forsake her family, but to rediscover herself. She began with small steps. Waking early to meditate, journaling her thoughts, and taking long walks in the nearby park. She dusted off her old sketchbooks and began drawing again, an activity she had abandoned decades ago. At first, it felt selfish, even strange, to focus on herself. But as days turned into weeks, Hoa noticed a transformation. Her laughter returned, softer at first, then stronger. Her energy grew, as she felt a renewed sense of purpose. When her children visited, they noticed the change. "Mom, you seem different, happier," her daughter remarked one afternoon. Hoa smiled, her eyes shining with quiet wisdom. "I've learned that taking care of myself doesn't mean I love you any less. It means I can love you better." Lesson: true compassion begins within. As the Buddha taught, self-love is not selfish. It is the foundation of a kind and giving heart. By nurturing ourselves, we not only heal but also grow our capacity to care for others. The trouble is, you think you have time. Buddha Nam was a beloved figure in his community. Despite his advancing age, his sharp wit and infectious humor made him a favorite at every gathering. But when he returned to his modest home each evening, an unfamiliar silence greeted him. His wife had passed years ago, and his children, though caring, were busy with their own lives. They called occasionally, sent gifts during the holidays, but their visits were rare and fleeting. One winter, during Tet, his eldest son's family came to visit. Nam had prepared days in advance, cleaning the house, cooking traditional dishes, and setting aside a special red envelope for each grandchild. When they arrived, the house came alive with chatter and laughter. Yet Nam noticed something, though they were physically present. Their attention was elsewhere. His son was glued to his phone. His daughter-in-law hurriedly worked on her laptop, and his grandchildren barely looked up from their tablets. Nam watched quietly as the gifts he had carefully chosen were opened with brief smiles before being set aside. That night, as he sat alone after they left, he felt an ache he hadn't known before. The gifts hadn't bridged the gap between them. The conversations had been surface level, hurried, and the moments he longed for, the deep, heartfelt connections, had slipped away like grains of sand. The next morning, Nam resolved to make a change. He decided to stop placing his hopes in material offerings and instead focus on creating meaningful moments. The next time his family visited, he didn't prepare elaborate gifts. Instead, he told stories from his youth, played simple games with his grandchildren, and shared wisdom through his anecdotes. The atmosphere shifted. His grandchildren began asking questions about his past, and his son laughed at a story he hadn't heard before. Later, as his youngest grandchild hugged him tightly and whispered, "I love your stories," Grandpa Nam realized he had found what he'd been missing. It wasn't the gifts, but the memories they created together that would last. Lesson: material possessions are fleeting, but shared experiences endure. The Buddha's teachings remind us that true value lies not in what we give, but in how we connect. Cherish each moment as a gift, for time is the only true currency we have. Let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. Buddha had always been a pillar of strength. Widowed at a young age, she raised 3 children on her own, working tirelessly to provide for them. Now, in her late 72s, she lived alone in the house she had built with her husband decades ago. Her children visited occasionally, but their lives were busy, filled with the responsibilities of work and family. One evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, a wave of loneliness washed over her. She thought of her children and grandchildren, of the bustling life her home once held. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Lan had learned through years of hardship that gratitude was her anchor. She thanked the sun for its warmth, the wind for its gentle caress, and the Buddha for each breath she took. She thanked the years she had spent with her husband and the joy of watching her children grow. Even in solitude, she found reasons to be grateful. Her practice of gratitude transformed her days. She found joy in the small things. The way the morning light filtered through the trees, the sound of birdsong, and the aroma of the jasmine tea she brewed every afternoon. When her neighbor's young daughter came to visit, Lan shared stories of resilience and hope, filling the child's heart with warmth and laughter. One day, her eldest son asked, "Mother, how do you stay so content despite everything?" Lan smiled, her face lined with years of wisdom. Contentment doesn't come from having everything we want. It comes from appreciating everything we have. Life is a gift, even with its sorrows. Her words stayed with her son, who began visiting more often, bringing his children to hear their grandmother's wisdom. Lan's home slowly regained some of its warmth, not because she had demanded their presence, but because her gratitude and acceptance inspired them to return. Lesson: gratitude is the foundation of a peaceful heart. As the Buddha taught, acceptance of life, as it is not as we wish it to be, frees us from suffering. By focusing on the blessings we have, we cultivate joy and resilience, even in the face of life's challenges. Inclusion is not a burden, but a profound opportunity for growth, reflection, and connection. Through the lens of Buddhist philosophy, we can navigate old age with wisdom and grace, finding peace in impermanence, strength in self-compassion, and joy in gratitude. The path may not be easy, but each step brings us closer to understanding the true essence of life. A heart filled with love, a mind free of attachment, and a spirit that finds contentment in the present moment.